Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Awesome Dynamic Show. I'm Terry Levin, our Director of Sales here at Awesome Dynamic, and we got a great topic we're going to talk about today. We are going to be discussing Amazon listings and how to create effective ones. So I don't want to waste any time. I'm going to jump it right over to Tim, who's going to get us started. Tim, have at it.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry, for the introduction. Yeah, so today we are going to be talking about the secret to writing effective Amazon listings, which includes good titles, bullet points, descriptions, and we're going to touch a little bit on search terms as well today. So without any further ado, let's hop right into our presentation. So the first thing we want to kind of cover is why is it important to write effective product details on your listings? A lot of people always ask, can't we just put some basic information? Well, we really want to make sure that you are not only describing the product itself, but we want to sell the product. Some people just put very cut and dry information into their products and into their product details, and that's not enough. You need to actually sell the product to a customer and explain to them why they want to purchase your product as opposed to someone else. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. When you are writing your product descriptions and details, you want to make sure you keep an eye, you want to identify your ideal or core buyer, and you also want to make sure that you write directly for and personally for that ideal buyer. So there's a couple things to keep in mind throughout the rest of this presentation. The other reason why we want to write very effective product details is because customers can't hold your product in their hand. You need to provide that experience of picking up, holding the product, and understanding exactly why they would want to buy your product. And it's much the same as the reason why you really want to have fantastic looking photos and many different angles of your product in your photos, because again, customers can't necessarily see the product itself in person. You need to provide that experience for them. So before I start moving on to all the detailed information, we want to actually go through exactly what Amazon's guidelines are for all the different product details. But before I do that, I don't know if anyone had any questions about why we would want to do this. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Well, I would just say this is a topic that I have conversation with potential clients all the time. I think a lot of them are looking for some kind of magic formula that we might have to help them. And I talk just in terms of the quality of the listing. And we always talk in terms, and I know you're going to, I'm sure, go there, but you sort of dug in a little bit to compelling people to buy the product as opposed to just sort of listing features or, so I say to them, look at some listings. You see a listing where it says imported is the first bullet point. The second bullet point is, 22 by 17. I go, are you excited now to buy this? You're not, because it's not giving you anything that's wanting you to go click that button. It's not compelling you to buy. And the pictures are the same way. And you talked about, you're not able to touch and feel like you're in a store, and that's really important. And, one thing I'm sure you'll talk about a little more, but we like the lifestyle type pictures, someone using the product or the setting of where the product might be used, something more than just the basic pictures. And those things really make all the difference in the world. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. All right, so with that in mind, let's find out what Amazon says about what you can and cannot do with your product details, starting with the title guidelines. So Amazon guidelines for product titles. One thing to keep in mind is that the length of any kind of title cannot be longer, as a general rule, longer than 50 characters. Keep in mind, though, that some product categories do allow for longer titles, so make sure you follow the style guides for your category specific product. In addition to the length of it, the other thing to keep in mind is Amazon does have certain guidelines about how to capitalize the title. They say that you want to capitalize the first letter of each word. They recommend not using any all caps. If you do use any kind of conjunctions, such as and, or, for, or any kind of articles, those should not be capitalized. And don't capitalize prepositions fewer than 5 letters. There's all sorts of title guidelines out there. You know, some of them are based off of different writing styles like the MLA or what have you. But these are more or less Amazon's guidelines to keep it consistent across the entire selling platform. So it's really important to kind of keep these in mind as you're writing your different titles. In addition to that, any kind of numbers or some symbols, if you ever need to type out any numbers, so let's say if you want to say that 2 of these items are included in this bundle, then you want to use the number 2 instead of writing out the word 2. Also, if there's any measurements, you want to write out the measurement units. So instead of using the double quotes or the quotes symbol for inches, you want to actually write out inches. I'm sure you could also abbreviate it too. You can do IN or IN period to indicate that as well if you're really crunched for space. And just like it said before, make sure you don't use any symbols. So tildes, exclamation points, asterisks, dollar signs, question marks, etc. So make sure you don't enter any of those into the product title either. And don't use any other higher ASCII characters like the copyright symbol. I've seen actually people who really want to include the copyright symbol because they have a copyrighted, or let's say even a registered trademark. You can't put the registered trademark or copyright symbol next to your product's brand name. So that's also a really important thing that you need to watch out for whenever you're creating your product titles. A little bit more about the product titles. You want to make sure you don't include any pricing or promotional messages. So you can't say includes free shipping or this is a sale on a particular product. And the reason for that is because you may not be the only person selling this particular product. Keep in mind, this is Amazon's listing. It's not your listing. Therefore, Amazon can allow other sellers to sell that product if they are selling the actual product. So any kind of seller specific information about shipping or pricing does not belong in the product title. Don't use anything really subjective, like this is a best-selling item, this is a hot item. Anything that's really is not objective in nature does not belong inside of the title. And anything with your merchant named or for your brand or your manufacturer should not be included unless it's private labeled. So the private label pretty much acts as a brand. And what this really means is that, let's say if you are manufacturing the very specific product, that cannot be in the product title itself. Great. I have actually one question. Looks like Elizabeth is asking a question right now before we move on. So let me pull up her question here. She asks, I use dashes to distinguish the general part and the specific part of the title. Is that wrong? I know Blake recently did some checking on this, and dashes, I believe, are okay, but Amazon is actually encouraging sellers to use commas to separate parts of their title, if I'm not mistaken. Blake, what's your take on that?
Correct. Commas are the actual standard that Amazon asks at. Although there are no rules saying you can't use dashes, what we found is with a comma, if you picture a comma next to a word and a space compared to a space dash space, you actually save a character. And when titles typically only show 50 to 52 characters on both mobile and desktop browsers, depending on how big your screen is and other variable factors, you actually essentially save a character by using the comma space. So sometimes it's not as visually appealing, but again, it's not against the rules to use space dash space or dashes in general. So go for it, but just keep in mind that shorter titles are more effective and visually seen from customers. So keep that in mind if you need a lot to type in to a title.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Blake. And it looks like actually Elizabeth, she's actually from Funflector, and she gave us a link here that we can probably check out and take a look at her specific listing. Maybe we can take a quick look at that here. So give me a moment. I will pull that up here. So here's an example of her listing. So she has fun flector, safety reflector, coffee, 2-pack. I, for the most part, like this title. It's very simple, very straightforward. She actually did ask, she tries to use all 50 characters, keep it short to be easier to read. And we're actually going to go much more in depth into beyond these guidelines that we just set out. There's actually going to be a lot of recommendations outside of just the guidelines. And one of those recommendations is to try and keep it as short as possible. If nothing else, because what happens is mobile users, you really have to keep in mind the mobile user. I think it's like 60 or 70% of Amazon customers shop via mobile or through the mobile app. And when they are shopping, much of the title is actually cut off. And so that's where that whole 50 character minimum or 50 character maximum kind of comes in. And even if it's a little bit longer, making sure that the most important information that someone needs to know to decide whether or not to buy your product really needs to be at the front of that title. But we're going to get into that a little bit more. I don't know if Blake, you want to add anything onto that?
No, I think when we go over recommendations, we'll definitely cover that. And if Elizabeth still has, if it hasn't answered her questions, go ahead and ask us again.
Absolutely. Keep the questions coming. We love to see questions coming in. It gives us, it helps us give examples and show how all this stuff works in practice. So thank you again.
Hey, Tim, real quick while we're looking at this, for me, where it says 2-pack, I'm wondering why they're. Do we like the dash in between 2 and pack?
That I actually just saw that now, right when you mentioned it, and yeah, I don't think it's necessary to say to have a dash inside of the 2-pack. In fact, one thing that I've seen is sometimes customers actually get confused seeing 2-pack, and I don't know why that is. And I've actually seen a lot of sellers have success as opposed to saying 2-pack is to say actually pack of 2. I don't know why, but it seems to clarify a little bit more exactly what is included with the product as opposed to doing 2-pack. So we oftentimes recommend sellers do A/B testing, where you test something and you confirm whether or not that is successful. And if you have full control of your listings, that's something that you can certainly do. Is try it one way, run it for like a couple weeks, and then try it a different way, run it for a couple weeks, and see which one seems to perform better. Because there's not necessarily just one cookie cutter way. As I said before, you have to keep your audience in mind. You have to know who is buying this product, and because there's different customers out there, different people looking at these products, what works for one listing may not necessarily work best for another.
Along the lines of Tim's point about pack of 2, Amazon actually recommends, again, not a requirement, but they recommend titling multi-packs in that format. But again, it's another case of 2-pack, you save upwards of 3 characters when you count spaces. But like Tim said, we have worked with many clients where we've seen better results in not saying 2-pack. For whatever reason, it confuses many customers, and for specific clients, creates a lot of returns for them because for some reason they're confused. So again, this is it's a case that is a very case-by-case situation. So just keep that in mind with your characters.
Excellent point, Blake. All right, great. Well, then I think we'll move on. I think we covered title requirements pretty well there. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the bullet points, which is the second thing that most sellers see. So that's why we want to bring it up right away. So Amazon guidelines for bullet points. I think most sellers know that you can create up to 5 feature bullet points. And the reason why we bring that up is because it's important to fill up all 5 of those. You want to take advantage of everything. Bullet points are really just a very precise description of exactly what the customer will get upon purchase. I know a lot of people like to put a lot of information into the bullet points and utilize all the characters that you're allotted, but we'll kind of go into a little bit more detail as to why that may not be the best practice. Amazon recommends that you make each bullet point brief yet description. This is not the place for paragraphs and sentences. Amazon even goes as far to say, use sentence fragments in your bullet points. If this is a set of items or a bundle of items, make sure that you list what's included in the set and the size of each item in your bullet points. And then if you ever need to include any warranty information or accessories that are included with it, save those usually for the last bullet point, unless it's a very important selling feature, which again, that's more of a recommendation that we'll dive into a bit more. So the next thing is, sorry, this didn't come up like I normally would have it come up. So excuse you for just a moment. All right. So next thing is semicolons. If you do need to put more than one phrase into a bullet point, Amazon recommends that you put semicolons to separate them. Again, just like the titles, don't spell out numbers. Use the actual number to signify any kind of numbers you want to put into the bullet points. And as I mentioned before, make sure that if you do have to write out things, do it in sentence fragments, and don't use any kind of ending punctuation. So don't put any exclamation marks. I think those could be, if used correctly, could be effective. And we're going to, again, cover that a little bit more. But don't put periods at the end. It's not a complete sentence. It just does not flow well with the point of doing these bullet points. No pun intended. Then the last thing is 500 characters. Actually, no, I got a couple more things. 500 characters maximum. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean you should fill out all 500 characters. In fact, using closer to 50 to 100 characters is usually what we recommend, sometimes even less than that. And you want to make sure you begin each bullet point with a capital letter. Again, we're looking at consistency here. If someone sees that some have periods at the end, some have capital letters, some don't, it just doesn't look like it's been carefully crafted and created. And just like we put in for the title, do not put any promotional or pricing information. Keep in mind that these listings are not just your listings. There could be other people selling on these listings if they have the product that you are selling. And the last thing, if it'll actually come up here. Actually, that was the last thing. All right, great. Description guidelines. So we went over the title. We went over the bullet points. Next thing that we want to come up and talk about is the actual descriptions themselves. So the descriptions are much further down on the product page, and therefore, we put a little bit less emphasis on the details, but this is your chance to put all the information that you want to about the product. So it helps a customer who's really scrutinizing your product, whether or not they want to buy it. So a couple of guidelines. First thing is that there's a 2,000 character maximum length for product descriptions. This is more than just a simple to the point description. So very much the opposite of your bullet points that you have ahead. Go ahead and, put more information in these, talk more than just the facts. And that's really what the description is meant for. And just to help reiterate that, a well-written product description can help the customer imagine the experience of owning and handling your product. And we mentioned that earlier when we talked about why it's so important to write great descriptions. It's also a place for you to give concise, honest, and friendly overview of how the product is used and where it fits in and how it fits in this particular category. A couple of examples of things that you can do is highlight best applications for the product, discuss the features and the benefits of the product, and focus on your unique properties. And one other thing that Amazon wants to make sure you do is that you do not mention any competitors in your product descriptions. This goes for the entire listing, though. You cannot mention any kind of competitors, not only in the product description, but also in your title or your bullet points. But most people usually will say, well, this is better than this other product, or, this other product doesn't do this very well, but we do. Those kinds of things need to cannot be in the product descriptions. And the last guideline we're going to go over really quick is about the search terms. After we finish up the search terms, we're going to take a little break and hand the floor over to Terry, but let's go through this. So search terms, you'll see sometimes people call these keywords. They're also called search terms. Essentially, it's just a place for you to be able to add additional words to your listings that that you want to show up for in search results that don't already exist anywhere else in your listing. We are going to be probably doing a dedicated webinar sometime in the near future about search terms and how to find successful search terms, how to check for them, how to use them, because this is just such an expansive topic. But I want to make sure we at least touch on how, at least a little bit about how they work in listings today. So as it's mentioned here, search terms are not necessarily required, but they are ridiculously useful. You do have up to 1,000 characters to use in that box, and keywords only include relevant information that's not already in any of the product names, the bullets, the product descriptions, or the brand name itself. And the other thing that I want to bring up here with the search terms themselves is when you are writing out search terms, and I thought that this, we just didn't include this in this part of it, but one thing to keep in mind with any search terms is that if you do put in any kind of, what do I want to say? Any kind of search term in there. So let's say you put a singular thing, like let's say if you want to put in the word closet, because this is a closet accessory, you do not also need to include the word closets with an S at the end. Amazon will automatically cover plurals of any word if you put them in there, as well as some common misspellings. But this is the place where if you see if you see like people oftentimes misspell something when they're searching for your product, this is the place to put that in there. And it sounds like Blake wanted to add something to this portion of it as well.
Yeah, I was going to let you finish, but I did want to
Okay.
mostly say that while they do correct some miscommon spellings, and they fix the plural for you. So if you were searching, like you said, erasers, you could just put eraser. But however, in our experience, we found out, for example, blueberry versus blueberries, where it's spelled IES, that actually, with testing, did not show up. So that's the search term keyword bank is a good place for if you sell something that is, for example, flavored with blueberry or strawberry, to put in blueberries and strawberries, etc., into the search term for someone who might search for that, but it doesn't necessarily fit somewhere in your product description, title, or bullets.
Gotcha. So it's the plurals of anything where you just tag an S at the end that you do not need to worry about those, but anything that's a more complex ending for plurals, you definitely want to include those.
That's a great way to sum it up. Thank you, Tim.
Excellent. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I know that I've seen this before, is Amazon does say that you cannot mislead a customer with search terms. So let's say if your product, so that includes putting items into the search terms which are not true about your product. So let's say if you're selling food that is not organic, and you put into the search terms that it's an organic product, so it shows up for people looking for organic products, that can be considered misleading a customer, and that would not be a good thing to include in any search terms. The other thing is including any kind of competitors' brand names. So if you want to show up for a competing product, you cannot actually put it into the search terms. Again, Amazon is worried about misleading customers. We tried to dig it up and find it in, I know I've personally seen it before in Amazon's policies, but I know Amazon is always adjusting their policies, and we had a little trouble digging it up. I think this time around, I think Blake was trying to find that information, but just was not able to locate it. But I want to at least bring it up at this point in time just to show, it's something to watch out for and to be careful of if that's something that you have in your listings, and just want to keep a lookout. All right, great. Then with that, I think I want to turn the floor back over to Terry because he wants to talk a little bit about Awesome Dynamic. So I'll turn that over to you, Terry.
Don't I always? All right. Well, thank you, Tim. Anyhow, so we want to just give you a quick rundown on some of the services that we offer here at Awesome Dynamic. I also want to say hello to the people that have joined us today. Some of our favorite clients are on there, and please keep those questions coming and bring your friends. We like to have more people and more questions all the time. It helps us get some good information out. As for us over at Awesome Dynamic, what we're really all about, as it says right there, is getting you new targeted customers. Many different ways we do that. We do that with our responsive web design. We do that with our search engine optimization. We do Google virtual tours, which can help as well with getting you some online presence and boosting your SEO rankings a bit. And of course, we're talking Amazon seller consulting, and we do that as well. All about bringing more business to you and all the different ways we can do it. We're always available to talk about the different models we offer at 800-238-1811, or you can get directly to me at terry@awesomedynamic.com. So keep those things in mind. It's the holiday season now. Give your company and yourself a present and get involved with us and let us help you have a great 2017. So that's a quick rundown. We'll talk more about some of the features of our website a little later in the broadcast, but I want to get it right back to Tim to dive back into our topic. I do have a question that I wanted to bring up. I don't know if this is something that you're going to get to at some point during the rest of the presentation, but how many of the bullet points are we typically going to see if someone's on a mobile device as opposed to on a regular desktop?
Well, it's a good question, and yeah, definitely is something we're going to cover a little bit more in depth, Terry. But just to answer your quick question there, bullet points on mobile devices, so people when they visit the product page will actually only be able to see the first 3 bullet points, and sometimes if it's a really long bullet point, it'll actually get cut off, so they don't actually see some of it. So yeah, that's we're going to talk a little bit more, but that's why it's so important to make sure you have your most important information about the product in those first 3 bullet points. So
that's where I was headed. Thanks.
Yeah, that is a good thing. Thank you for bringing that up. And also, before we move on, it looks like Elizabeth had another question. This is fantastic. So she says that she has used competitors brand names in her listings, and she knows that Funflectors are actually in her competitors' listings. How bad is that? It generally, when it comes to issues like this, it can range anywhere from just a simple slap on the wrist if Amazon finds out, and it could be as bad as Amazon suspending your listings or your seller accounts. It depends on the severity of the problem, and if you feel that that you are negatively impacted by someone else doing this, you always have the option of reporting that another seller is doing that through Seller Central. If you do that, make sure that you're completely above board with all your policies, so they don't, look into your information and find out that you're actually violating a policy before doing that. But it is absolutely important that if you want to be 100% above board, that you don't do that. Again, I need to do a little bit more research to make sure that that is the current policy. I know I've seen it before. We all know that Amazon can change their policy on a dime from one day to the next. So they may have lifted that restriction. So that's something that we would have to do some research on. And what I'll do is we actually have Phil on today, who's going to be writing the blog post based on this information. And, we'll try to get get that answer in that blog. So if you read that later, you should have the answer there.
Tim, I wanted to just piggyback on that for a second and just say that
absolutely.
I think we all think that living by the law of Amazon is really important, because I do get the calls when people call me in an absolute state of panic saying, I don't know what I did, but my account's suspended and I'm losing X amount of dollars per day, and it's not a great place to be. So, I would keep that as a strong consideration anytime you're walking that fine line, because those are not great calls, and it's usually a process to figure out what you did and then to get it fixed. So you probably don't want to end up Elizabeth in that boat. So I would say live by the law as much as you can. I think you'll be in better shape overall.
And I think a lot of sellers feel that Seller Central and Amazon is just a very dog eat dog kind of marketplace where, you just need to do everything. The whole issue that happened with everyone doing those incentivized reviews and Amazon putting the ban on that whole practice. Sellers are doing anything they can and are risking a lot to do some of these things. And it just depends on how much risk you really want to take. And just to kind of piggyback on that a little bit, Amazon, how much trouble could you really get into? As I said, it could be as severe as that. I think that so long as any changes that you make to your seller account, or I'm sorry, to your product listings, are in the best interest of the customer and are not misleading the customer, then Amazon usually will turn a blind eye to any kind of minor policy violations. But you just never know with Amazon. If you want to be 100% above board, don't do some of these things. And again, we're just going to double check on that. All right, great. Well, with that, let me go back to the presentation here. So great. We went over how all the different details and the guidelines of how to create the product detail pages. Let's dive in a little bit more and let's go through each of those different sections and talk about, what's involved with actually creating useful product titles. So we'll start with product titles here today. So our recommendations, there's 3 general rules with the product title. You want to be descriptive, you want to be concise, and you want to be precise. So those are some great general guidelines for when you're creating your product titles to keep in mind to make sure that you're getting the information across in an effective way. We recommend, even though Amazon does say, put the brand name of the product at the beginning of the listing, that's their recommendation. We usually say, put the brand name. If it's not really a well-known brand name, maybe it's something that you don't want to necessarily put into the title, unless it's like a really short brand name, or if it's a descriptive brand name. So, thinking back to Elizabeth's Funflectors, Funflector is a very short name, and it doesn't take up that many characters. And I think that is just that's appropriate to have at the beginning of the product title. But let's say if you have a longer brand name, maybe it might be a good idea to move that all the way to the end of the product description. I'm sorry, the product title, or maybe even not including it in the product title. Don't forget that the brand name shows up right after the title anyways. So it'll say such and such a product by Funflector if you have the brand section of your title filled out. And I think, Blake, Amazon's almost requiring you to fill out a brand name for almost every product. And we've seen some products become suppressed, I think was the term, to showing up in the catalog because there was not a brand name. Is that correct?
That's very correct. And also, though, so it looks like Amazon's making changes towards where you have to enter your brand name as a required field now, but that's also searchable. So it's becoming less and less important to put your titles in your brand name titles, but to that extent, it's not official yet, but it looks like that's where they're moving towards. So that you give your title probably more time to more room to describe exactly what you're selling without having to put your brand name in there with those limited 50 characters, because it's not a whole bunch.
Great. The other thing that we find is that some sellers, this is the exact opposite of what Elizabeth does, is we see a lot of sellers trying to cram a ton of words into the product title, and it's really long, is almost overly descriptive, and there's a lot of keywords. It's called keyword stuffing. And I think that a lot of buyers nowadays, and I know when, I'm thinking of my own shopping habits, when I see a product title that just goes on and on with all sorts of different descriptors of what this product can do. It seems like it can do way more than they're overselling me. Like, let's say a cable. I'm just trying to buy a USB cable, and it's trying to tell me that this is this is very rugged cable. This is all these other things, and the product title goes on forever. I am generally less likely to select that particular product. And as I said, I think a lot of consumers think of that as a kind of turnoff when there's all sorts of unrelatable keywords in the title. The next thing is adding keywords to titles does not necessarily help you with search results. And I think that's a common misconception, is that the reason why sellers are stuffing all these keywords into the title is because they think it's going to help them show up better on results, when in fact Amazon's algorithm does not prioritize, or does not, how do I want to say this? They do not emphasize the placement of keywords in any particular part of the listing. So by having them in there, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll show up better for that. And then the last recommendation, I thought I had one more recommendation. It looks like I do not, but we do have a quick question, actually just a comment actually from Elizabeth. She says that the title shows up on the shipping slip too, so it's good to get that in the front so people as many times as possible. Yeah, so if you really want to have good brand recognition and you want to have everyone see that, yeah, when you print out the packing slip, or whenever someone looks at it, they're going to see that Funflector and they're going to remember that Funflector. So that's a really good argument to be able to put the brand name first. But it's a balancing act. If your brand name is really long, they're not going to actually see what your product is until 30 characters in. Then maybe we would want to move it towards the end. But that's a good argument to having your brand name at the front. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that. Anyone wanted to comment on that at all?
Nope, just a great comment from a viewer. We like that.
Great. Thanks again, Elizabeth, sorry. All right. So let's take a look at some examples that we came up with of some good and bad product titles. So let's say we're selling Crocs. This would be a very good product title to use: the Crocs Beach Clog Lime Medium. So and then describing a little bit more of what exactly medium means. So this is a good product title. You see you have the brand name at the front of it. It says Crocs. Many people recognize the Crocs brand name, so it's a very descriptive brand name. Beach Clog is the specific product, the color, which is lime, and then the size of it, which is medium, and then a little bit more information towards the end of it that may get cut off. But ultimately, when they're looking at sizing information, usually they're already clicked into your listing and will actually see the full product title. So this is a very good product title example, separated by commas, as Amazon recommends. So this is a really good one. Let's take a look at something that maybe would not be so good. So Crocs Beach Clog. So this certainly does have the brand name at the front, but it doesn't tell me anything else about the product. What color it is, doesn't tell me what size it is. We really want to make sure we put the specific product information, especially if we are doing any kind of variations for particular products. So as we know, many shoes come in different sizes as well as different designs or colors. And Amazon does allow you to do parent-child variations of a product to let a customer choose which size or which color they want. And it's important to make sure that you have the title for each of those products contain that specific variations information in the title, but just put it at the end so that it doesn't take up space towards the front that has, the more important information in terms of getting them to find that particular product. Anything we want to add on the recommendations for the product titles? Blake, anyone?
No, I think you covered it quite well. It's pretty simple. Just get your product and as much information as you can out in as least characters as you can, and try and be effective. Have good taste in when your brand name is either too long or doesn't sell the product well.
Excellent. Thank you, Blake. All right, so now we talked about the product titles. How do we write powerful bullet points? This is the second thing that most customers will see on a listing. So our recommendation, one thing to keep in mind is that you are limited to 5 points. That's almost kind of requirement. So something that we want to make sure to reiterate. Use one sentence fragment per bullet point. Amazon does say that you can do multiple fragments, and they recommend doing semicolons, but we really see doing short sentence fragments is the most effective way to be able to have someone to have effective bullet points, I guess you want to say. We also see that it's best to avoid cliche lines. So, you see a lot of times terms like this, excellent product quality, or very durable, or they're just a very cliche selling lines that, again, most consumers nowadays are more I guess you could say more sensitive to that information. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind when you're writing your bullet points. One common way to think about writing your bullet points is that you should think about the most important technical details of your product, put one technical detail per bullet point, and then write a little bit as to why that's a benefit of your particular product. So let's say if you're selling a shoe, maybe what you want to do is that shoe is very supportive. So you might want to say extra support to improve your posture, something to that effect. That's a very short, very concise bullet point that explains a fact about the product, as well as detailed information as to why it's beneficial. It's not extra information. Maybe want to put some other words in there, maybe just to jazz it up a little bit and make it a little bit more compelling. Again, you're trying to sell this product, not just give not just give what do I want to say, just give facts about the product. You want to sell this product, so you want to keep that in mind. The other thing you want to keep in mind, and this is going back to Terry's point that he brought up a little earlier, is that most people who browse on Amazon are mobile users. And to that point, you will see that most mobile users, in fact, I think all mobile users, will only see the first 3 bullet points at first. The only way that they're actually going to see any additional bullet points is if they actually click into the listing and look at more additional product details, which most mobile users don't do. And the ones who do are the ones who maybe are more careful shoppers, people who do a lot more research. So you want to put the more selling information into the first 3 bullet points, and then other detailed information to help make that decision, and further in the last 2 bullet points or in the product description. And as I said here, usually they have to click in to be able to see additional bullet points. So you want to make sure you prioritize the most important information so it's presented in the first 3 bullet points. All right, great. So we got a couple examples of, I'm sorry, we got a few more notes. I apologize. First bullet points, we usually like to have what is actually included with the product, especially if you're doing variations. The first bullet point should be what this particular variation is. So when they're clicking between different variations, they'll see right away what the difference is. I can't tell you how many times I get frustrated on Amazon because I'm looking at a couple of different products. They look exactly the same to me, and nothing's really telling me what the difference is between them. You want to make that very clear exactly what the difference is, because if I don't really understand the difference, I'm more likely to maybe look for a competing product or something else. So make sure you put that into that first bullet point or second bullet points. Reserve that last bullet point for any warranty information. So again, this was Amazon's recommendation. That's certainly our recommendation as well. If the warranty information is something that you want to include a bullet point, put it as a last bullet point. But if it's something that is a really big selling point of your product, you may want to move that up from the last bullet point to maybe the second or third one. But in general, if you do want to include it, Amazon, and we recommend that you put it as the last bullet point. And again, you want to move it up if it's an excellent warranty or a selling point. You do have up to 500 characters that you can use in these. But 500 characters is a lot. That's a wall of text. And if you have 5 walls of text in front of you, consumers are usually not likely to read all of them. So in this case, less is more. Try to be short and concise with your language and get to the point as quickly as possible. We usually recommend between 30 and 70 characters per bullet points. Again, really kind of depends on what the particular product is. And it should be, and as I mentioned before, if you do put any kind of sales adjectives like luxurious, paralleled, super efficient, anything like that, makes you frame around an actual factual product feature. And as a general rule of thumb, you want to make bullet points easy to scan. Consumers are not going to want to sit there and read a bunch of bullet points, and they're there to make a very quick decision as to whether or not they want to either buy the product, or you convince them enough to look at the product more in depth, maybe scroll down and look at the reviews and see what's going on with it. But if you have very long bullet points, consumers are less likely to want to read them, and therefore a little bit higher bounce rate in terms of looking at other products that they can understand much quicker.
I think the opposite end of that is a well-crafted bullet point set essentially will increase sales. So just something to think about.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So next up, want to talk about a couple of examples of good bullet points. So here's an example of 5 good bullet points for a particular product. First thing is, what it describes exactly what this product is. It's a garage ceiling storage attachment. Next bullet point gives you specific product details, because if I'm looking for something that installs in my home, I probably would want to know specifically how big this is and what the capacity is. So it's getting this information right up in front. Talks about the adjustability of it, again, giving me detailed information, a specific fact that it's adjustable, and shows me the dimensions that I can adjust up to. Wire design, that's again, we're looking at the product detail, wire design, and the reason why that's beneficial is because you can actually see everything. It doesn't conceal anything. And this is just another benefit. It can store large and odd shaped items. So these are excellent ones. The one thing we may want to put in here is maybe if there's any warranty information, put that as the last bullet point. But this tells me at a glance probably 90% of the information that I need to know to be able to make that buying decision. And if I did want to know more, more information is going to be in the product details or in the product description further down the listing. So this is a very effective example of great bullet points. Something that is not so effective, we'll take a look at this, is just really straightforward and simple. Says that it has an attachment and it's adjustable and nothing else. This tells me nothing about the product. I really can't make a decision on this. And just make sure you really use these bullet points, not just be factual, and not go on and on about the product details. I think it's both sides of the spectrum. Effective bullet points can really make or break your product. Great. And then the last thing we want to cover today is crafting impressive product descriptions. So this is probably, I think, the most fun part of writing descriptions. And we'll talk about things that you can do to make great product descriptions. So one thing that you want to know about product descriptions is that you can use line breaks. So one thing about product descriptions, you can't use any kind of HTML formatting. You can't put bolding. You can't put links. You can't put bolded lists or ordered lists, anything like that. That's against Amazon's policy, even though it's doable. And I've seen many listings that have a lot of HTML in their product description, but that is strictly against Amazon's policy. The only piece of HTML that you can use is a line break. So basically creating paragraphs. And we recommend that you take advantage of those. Lets you break up what's just a wall of text into smaller, easier to consume paragraphs. It also allows you to almost create additional quote unquote bullet points so that you can have another easy to scan list of product features that you want to put in there. The other thing is you want to try avoid using all caps. There are some exceptions to this rule. You know, you really want to know your market or audience to determine if it's really useful to use caps. But as a general rule of thumb, you want to avoid them. And then you probably also want to include information that's commonly asked for. So if there's a question that you get very often about your particular product and it's not answered in any of the bullet points, then perhaps it's a good idea to put that additional information into the details, into the product description, so that if someone is asking that question, they can actually find it. So good thing that you want to kind of good rule of thumb is doing the whole who, what, where, when, where, and why of your product. So describe who this product is for, describe what the product does. When is kind of a little bit of a subjective thing, maybe if it's a timed product or something like that, something that helps you in a time manner. Where this product is generally used, and why they should purchase your product as opposed to someone else's, but keeping in mind that you can't necessarily mention any kind of competing products. And it sounds like Blake might have something to add on to this a little bit.
How do you know, Tim? Okay.
I'm psychic like that.
Okay. I was going to, again, let you finish, but since you stopped, I'll just cut in and say that a well-written product description is the only chance you have of actually putting paragraph text for your customers to experience owning or handling your product. So just put yourself in the customer's shoes. What would they want to feel, touch, think, about your product? Because this is your place to do that. And so if you can incorporate those kind of feel, touchy, thinking things, your product can definitely benefit from firing off the customer's imagination. So just something to think about, again, for the product description section.
Yeah, very good points, Blake. And just to kind of tag onto that a little bit, I put at the end here, tell a story. If you're having trouble trying to come up with a good way to write your product descriptions, just starting with a story of maybe a customer of you has been very happy with their product, describe how it helped that particular customer, and that would be a very effective way to be able to appeal to customers and say like, oh, I could see myself in that same situation, seem to help this person. I think this is a good idea. So they then decide to buy. So just wanted to kind of add that in there as well. So, and I think with that, we just want to kind of give you a couple of quick examples of good and bad product descriptions. So a good product description, we don't have any line breaks in here, but you can see at the beginning here, it talks about these particular earbuds, talks about, what they do well. Highly portable, these highly portable earbuds use 3 sizes of cushions to ensure comfortable in-ear fit sealing the ear to deliver deep bass. So it talks about another benefit of it, just kind of gives you other details about it. And just a really good description. We can add a lot more into here and again do separate bullet points, but I think a lot of people ignore the description section and end up putting something like what we see oftentimes is just a really simple, here's the description of what the product is. It's portable isolation earbuds. This really doesn't compel me to buy a product, to be quite honest. I just don't think that I would want to buy something that just had a very short description, didn't give me more details and answer any questions that I might have about it. So, all right. Well, that pretty much brings me to the end of, oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Building effective search terms. We wanted to go into this, but I don't think we have enough time today to be able to do this. And that's where I wanted to mention that we'll be doing another webinar at some point in the near future about search terms. But for the most part, we reached the end of our webinar for today, and I don't see we have any more questions. If anyone does have a question, we have a couple minutes left here, but now it doesn't look like we have any coming in anymore. All right, well then with that, I will pass it back over to Terry to kind of close out the webinar, and yeah, we'll go ahead and move it over to him. So Terry, if you'll take it away.
Thank you, Tim. I think that was a lot of great information. I know I learned a bunch of things myself and love when that happens. Hope our viewers and participants did the same. I want to close out by talking a little bit about our website real quick, awesomedynamic.com. All the webinars we do, and we do one every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, are going to be available to you on our website, right at the top under the webinar tab. So you can go there when you have time and sort of review any of these, look for some different topics that are interesting to you, and go ahead and get some great information on those. Phone number again, 800-238-1811. And I can always be reached also at terry@awesomedynamic.com. Want to remind you that new customers call us every day, and we want them to be calling you too. We can help you with that with our responsive web design and our search engine optimization. For Amazon, our clients are having tremendous success every day, and you can definitely be a part of that as well. We have many different options and ways that we can help you, including coming to these webinars every week. But I'd love to talk to anybody who's interested more about how we can increase their sales dramatically. We have on our website our awesome list where you can sign up and get great information about upcoming events, what webinars are coming, and other things of importance like that. So I want you to take advantage of that. And as always, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that we would love to have you give us a 5-star Google review. They're very important to us and helps our business tremendously. So if you learned anything valuable today, we'd love you to take advantage of that opportunity to go ahead and give us a great 5-star Google review. Very much appreciated. So I think that pretty much sums it up for today. Look forward to seeing you on our next webinar next Thursday. Tell your friends, bring some questions. We'd love to help you with that. And don't forget to review the other ones as we talked about on our website. So for that, I'd like to say it's time for us to go. We'll see you next week. Thanks for everybody for their help today. Tim, great job. And we'll see you guys next time.
Adios.
Adios.